Hello, my name is Delaney Rodgers. I'm a sports psychology professional. Thank you for having me today.
Hi, my name's Beth Ann. I am the head coach for our women's soccer program. So glad to have you here with us today.
I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you requesting to interview me today. It's great to meet you and learn more about what I can do to help you as well as your team.
I'm excited to learn more about your philosophy and your methods. After extensive research on what is best for our athletes, we have put a lot of thought into figuring out that our program needed and ultimately decided that hiring an SCP professional was the best option to improve our program as well as to improve our athletes.
That's exciting to hear. Resources myself as well as other SCP professionals can provide have proven to be extremely worthwhile and beneficial for athletes and coaches and athletic programs as a whole. Can you tell me a little bit more about any specific concerns you have?
We're looking to acquire a sports psychology professional to assist our team in bettering their mental well-being for their athletic performance. I have noticed a few things with my athletes over the past few seasons that I believe are impeding on their athletic performance. Various things such as mental blocks, outside stressors, team chemistry issues, and more. So I decided a little while ago to educate myself on the options that I had, and after a bit of research, I concluded that hiring a professional was the responsible decision. I think that a lot of the issues I have noticed on my team are not things I myself am capable of solving on my own. So I feel that I needed someone to provide assistance to me as well as to guidance to my athletes. If hired, you would be expected to help manage these issues we have already noticed and observe for anything else that we haven't noticed yet. Our ultimate goal is to create an environment where our athletes thrive, and we can hope that you help us do that.
All those things you mentioned are common among athletes. I fully believe I can help your program in those areas. My goal is the same as yours. I want your athletes to reach their full athletic potential. There are many ways that I can help them get there. While I have a lot of thoughts about methods and strategies, I want to know more about what you have found in your research and what questions you have that were left with after you read a bit about sports psychology.
While I feel I learned a decent amount while reading about sports psychology, I'm not sure I am familiar with the exact practices of an SCP professional. So I'm eager to find someone who can help my athletes reach their full potential as they continue their careers. From the readings I have done, I know that there are many ways that you can help my athletes as well as myself reach our goals, but I would like to first learn a little bit about your philosophy regarding sports psychology and how would you approach problems? Can you tell me a little bit about your philosophy?
Of course, I fully believe in a balanced, focused approach to the mental well-being of your athletes. This means that I believe that in order for your athletes as well as you yourself to succeed for this team, it is important to understand that there are many factors that determine the mental and physical well-being of the athlete. I'm aware of the importance of taking all aspects of the athlete's lives into consideration when determining a plan for success. Things such as their social, family, financial, academic, and much more are all the areas of their lives that will impact their athletics. It is important to understand that before trying to implement things that solely focus on just perfecting their athletic skill. I recognize that their performance is not only the thing that matters, that in order to perform their best, they need to feel their best both physically and mentally. It is my job to ensure that the athletes are at their complete mental potential, and I want to get to know your athletes along the way and learn more about how they process events and what they already do to help themselves through their struggles that happen throughout their life, both on the field and off of it.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I really appreciate your acknowledging that their athletics are not the only focus of their lives. I believe that our biggest issue is sometimes they find it difficult to separate their athletics from the rest of their lives. I notice that at points they become frustrated with themselves and have a hard time working as hard as I know they can when there is something happening outside of our practices. Our athletes are full-time dedicated students. They take pride in being their best academically as well as athletically. And it's a hard thing for them to balance.
All those concerns are fair. It's hard to manage being an athlete and balancing the other parts of your life. A big stressor is due to being pulled in so many ways for athletes. And being a student is always going to be stressful, even when you're not an athlete as well. But because sports psychology consultants continue to address being a student is not an easy task that comes with many ups and downs, but it's understandably difficult.
Exactly. A big reason for us looking for a consultant is because I have personally noticed that many of our athletes are feeling overwhelmed, not just with their athletic responsibilities, but things in all aspects of their lives. Obviously, this extra stress pours over into their athletic performance. I want them to be their best academically as well as athletically, but I personally am not sure exactly how to do that. So that's where you come in. I need someone to make sure they are taking care of themselves and not stretching themselves too thin. A stressed out athlete is not a great team player. I know that my major concern with these issues are how they reflect into their athletic performance, but I would be looking for you to obviously help them in their areas of their lives to improve performance. Can you tell me about how you would approach that?
Yeah, of course. Feelings of outside life overwhelming athletes and therefore leading to their athletic life is also overwhelming. It's extremely common for athletes who are also full time students. As their coach, it is completely understandable that your major concern is how they are playing and whether or not their head is completely in the game. My job would be, as you said, to ensure that they are working on balancing their lives, so that their athletic performance is up to their best potential. I have found in some readings a few techniques to help being able to feel like you are more in control of your life. Based on the things you just told me, I think some of these techniques would really help you and your team.
Yes, I would love to hear more about those.
There are a few ways that work for your specific concern, but the one great exercise in particular from Inside Sports Psychology that I would love to have your athletes do in the beginning of our meetings is the point of this exercise is to have the athletes refocus and visualize the things in their lives that are overwhelming them. Basically, they would write out their stressors on a piece of paper in their lives, and they would decide if each stressor is either within their control or outside of their control. Most of them, if not all of them, would find that the majority of their concerns are within their control. After refocusing on this, they can then begin the process of deciding on how to manage their stressors in their lives. Sometimes the biggest help is just seeing that they are more in control of their lives than they thought. This helps them to visualize what is overwhelming them, which is their first step in combating all that stress.
That is a great exercise that I've never thought of. I would love for you to implement that. I also think that this would be helpful to implement in my own life. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Of course, it is a great exercise. Could you tell me a little bit more about what you're expecting from the SEP that you hire?
I feel that that it would be beneficial to do maybe biweekly a regular check-in for the athletes, just so that I can have some peace of mind that they are taking care of themselves.
I agree with the check-ins. However, I do think it might be more comfortable if we would do weekly check-ins with the athletes, and the athletes that figure out that they need a little bit extra time to work on their concerns would always be welcome to work on them with me. I think having a set time for athletes to ask for help would be if they need it would provide a safe space for open communication. There is such a stigma that athletes are supposed to be strong and composed that most are afraid to ask for help, and then it shows weakness. So I would like the meetings with me to be regular. This way they can feel comfortable talking to me and have a place to go without feeling like they will be outcasted by their peers.
That's a really great point. I have noticed that athletes tend to ignore problems that they are embarrassed about, and it makes sense that it's due to us constantly telling them to be strong and brave on the field. That in their personal lives, they may not feel like they are allowed to be anything but strong or brave. I wanted to know how you see your work progressing as you build a rapport with the athletes.
Throughout the season, I plan to implement many techniques into your athletes' routines to help them get a better understanding of themselves as well as their desired outcomes. This could mean if they're hoping to perfect a new skill or to be able to overcome a certain mental block, we will work on those through the practices I show them. These are all works in progresses and only possible if the athlete focuses on reaching their fullest potential. It is my goal that all of these athletes will meet their individual athletic goals as we work together as we better their aspects of all their lives. Is there anything you wanted to know about these meetings specifically?
I believe I have a relative understanding for your vision and how you plan to work with the athletes. Maybe you could tell me more about how you plan on working with athletes on mental blocks, as you've mentioned. I notice many of my athletes are fully capable of doing skills or correcting mistakes, but often get stopped due to the mental blocks they have.
Mental blocks are common in athletes. The best way for them to physically beat them is for them to express what they feel is stopping them. Sometimes talking the mental blocks through is the most effective way to get over them. The athletes express they are struggling with mental blocks. I would ask to meet with me to work through these. They may know exactly why they are stuck. They just might need to work verbally through them to understand it.
Yes, that makes complete sense. I would love to see the athletes I know are struggling with mental blocks be able to work those out in an effective way.
I would also like to work through practices with you before you run them. There are ways you can run practices more effectively without impeding any skill practices or conditioning that you have planned. These can help you help the athletes through issues that they may be having perfecting certain skills.
That is really interesting. I would love to learn more.
There are different kinds of practices that I learned about by reading Inside Sports Psychology that I will explain to all the athletes as well as you. These are both things that you probably already do, whether you recognize them or not, but knowing the difference and the purpose of each kind of practice will help you reach desired outcomes. Random and blocked are the two kinds of practices. Random is when you constantly switching up the skills that you do at practice at random intervals. Blocked is when there's a set time for and place for each skill that you're working on. While blocked practice is better for short-term practices, random is better for long-term. I would help you and your athletes decide what the goal is for that day's practice that will allow you to create a layout of the practice that will achieve your goal.
Oh, I never thought about that. I really appreciate you sharing all this information with me. A lot of what you're saying is opening my eyes about how to help my athletes more effectively.
I'm really glad I can help. What concerns, if any, do you have for an SEP professional that you may hire?
Not necessarily concerns, but I did also want to know how will you handle if problems arise that you are not qualified for?
So I believe in a proactive approach. This means that I would request that there would be a team of professionals that were brought in and introduced to your athletes as a part of the training team. I would evaluate each athlete's needs as they meet with me. If something comes up that I do not feel fit to handle alone, I will offer to refer the athlete to another trusted professional who may be a bit more qualified than myself. I understand that my professional boundaries, and I would not want to put myself or an athlete in a position where I was offering treatment that I did not feel that I had a proper background or training in. That's why I fully believe in having familiar faces work with the athletes. This also helps to combat that embarrassed factor we were just discussing. Usually, the professional I refer them to be a friendly face. The athletes would be more willing to talk to them.
That makes sense. However, I do not know a lot of my athletes, or I do know a lot of my athletes are stubborn. So, what if one of them decides they don't want more help due to maybe feeling embarrassed or needing extra help? How would you handle that?
I understand the importance of each athlete having complete autonomy over their decisions, so ultimately I would not force them to speak with me or another professional. But there are a few options. I can ask a professional to assist me, meaning that they would guide me through the athlete's concerns so that I could be the one helping them, but I would have supervision and guidance throughout the entire thing. I could also bring the practitioner into these meetings with me and the athlete, so that would get them to meet the athlete before being one-on-one so they could get more comfortable talking to them while I'm around them, and then eventually move into a session alone if they're both comfortable with that.
That's great. I fully believe my athletes work better when their concerns are being heard. So I'm glad you feel that way. I feel that as a coach, you get nowhere by demanding respect from your athletes. You earn it by allowing them to come to you for help. A big part of this is hearing their concerns and doing something about it. I would not want an SCP professional that is going to demand action from them. I would want someone who wants to have a conversation about their concerns and needs, which brings me to I wanted to know about how you would manage ensuring that athletes felt comfortable talking to you.
I completely agree. I'm aware that I will not just walk in here and ultimately be a comfortable outlet for your athletes. This is something that will take time and effort. There will be an athlete who is more standoffish than the others, and there will be some who are immediately comfortable with me. The best way to create a safe space where those more stubborn athletes is for me to earn their trust. So things such as confidentiality are extremely important to the success of this process. Confidentiality is immensely important in order for the athletes to feel they are in a safe environment. They need to know that they can disclose things to me that are confidential and remain with me and only me. This means that their fellow teammates, as well as you, will not know what we discuss in our sessions. It is also important that I remain solely an SCP professional for these athletes, as well as you, having all of you know that I'm here as a professional rather than a friend, but I am still someone that you can all go to for help and resources.
Great. Boundaries are important. I just have a few more questions for you. A big thing that I have noticed myself is that I tend to lose track of my own energy. I try hard to be able to stay calm when something goes awry during a game because I know that the athletes look up to me as a guide, as their coach. How can you help me be a better coach?
Completely fair. First, I believe that you recognizing that you have those outbursts is already you working towards being a better coach for them. There are so many ways that I can help you alongside your athletes improve your mental focusing, especially during these high stress times that happen during games. Some things I would work on with you and your team are focusing on reframing after an error, bringing yourselves back to be focused on the next play. A few things I can do are first getting them familiar with what it looks like to refocus after something goes wrong in a competition. There are plenty of resources as well as online video examples of professional athletes grounding themselves. I could also help your athletes break the game up into play by play. This helps them recognize that once the play is over, it's time to move on to the next play and not dwell on what they did wrong in the previous play. It is important that you're also grounding yourself after an error. It's easiest for the team to refocus if they are encouraged to do so. So, as often as I will work with your team on that, I will also work with you. For instance, do you feel that you have outbursts more frequently at games when you went in with a negative mindset? Or do you feel that the outbursts are in reaction to a bad error play happen regardless of your mood before the game started?
I think it is fair to say that they happen more often on days where I went in either knowing the other team was going to run circles around us or in games where I went in feeling unprepared.
These feelings are very common, and I would work with you along along with your athletes. There are ways that I can also learn from your athletes, and they can learn from you. I will help you learn strategies to clear your mind and help focus on just the game in front of you. I would also implement positive self-talk strategies. I know affirmations can sometimes feel silly at first, but if you would give them the chance, you might see some serious improvement. If these aren't something you are ultimately feel comfortable doing, I'm always eager to help learn along with you. We can come up with techniques catered towards you to help you improve how you feel comfortable.
That's great to hear. Having someone who is flexible and willing to learn rather than insist on doing things one way or no way is extremely important to me. I am very excited that you feel that way. I think that this is the best approach for my athletes in particular. I do think that a relaxed approach and someone willing to get to know the athletes individually, as you've talked about, is the best course of action. And I really appreciate that that is your perspective.
I feel that because sports psychology is relatively new and many coaches and athletic programs like you are trying to decide what is the best fit for them, it is very important that SEP professionals like myself are willing to grow and learn as they provide treatment rather than just do things one way. There are plenty of ways that helping you and your athletes can help me do my job better and grow and as a more experienced professional. At the end of the day, my goal is solely to help your program improve and to help these athletes find a better balance in their lives.
Everything we've talked about today has been great, and I really appreciate you taking the time to explain your beliefs and methods further. I have learned more than I've ever expected to. I think those are all the questions I had for you. Do you have any remaining questions for me?
I did have a couple more. I wanted to know if you had any concerns with bringing an SEP to your program. I know that this can be very overwhelming for yourself and your athletes and the remainder of your program, but I want to help you as much as the athletes. So anything I can do to make this a smooth transition for you as well as them would be helpful for me.
Well, I agree that this is a little intimidating, but I think as long as we can create an open line of communication and establish set boundaries and create an environment that is beneficial to the program, then it will all be worth it. I just knowing that this is new to use will take some time and adjustment.
That is completely understandable, and I can definitely make that work.
Well, that is great. Thank you so much for taking the time to come in today. This was really great.
Thank you for having me and being so open to learn more about what I am so passionate about doing. It was great meeting you.
Well, you as well. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.